Hey everybody, these tape tips were originally recorded for YouTube, so occasionally an episode may have a few moments that are better suited for watching rather than just listening. The link to the YouTube video is in the show notes, and if you're on Spotify, you can choose to watch the video right there. Thanks. Having worked with hundreds, maybe even thousands of sport climbers, I've noticed a pattern of people getting stuck, sometimes temporarily, sometimes permanently, at around 11C, then 12B, and again at 13A. And these bottlenecks are often caused by the same issue. And the fix is relatively simple. It's not easy, mind you, but it's simple. In this video, we're going to look at what routes at these levels have in common, why it feels hard for you, and what you can do to make sure that you're prepared to level up. Let's get into it. Now, one of the main hallmarks of routes at these bottlenecks is that it gets harder to find stable positions. So the climber who hopes to move further will need to be comfortable in that instability. Think about it. Below 11C, nearly every move is stable, and there are rarely more than 2 moves in a row before you can find a good stance to chalk from, if not a full rest stance. Challenging clips are rare. In fact, clipping often happens from very stable positions. You clip, chalk again, shake some more. You hang out there for a while. It's stable. Now, of course, if you're new to that grade, it may not feel stable to you, but I'd be willing to bet that if you take a look back at those climbs, there's a lot of time spent hesitating, hanging on unnecessarily long without moving, lots of chalking up and shaking out nearly every other move. And that's because, even though it might feel hard to you, the positions themselves are stable, and that stability lures you into not wanting to leave. Now, as you move into mid to upper 512, those great stances get fewer and further between. You'll find more moves in a row that don't feel stable enough to stop and chalk, and some of the clips will be from less than stable positions. And again, these positions can be made more stable by exerting more strength over them. Sure, that's always the case, but you'll get fewer positions that you can just relax into, particularly if that's the upper level of your current ability. And even here, at the mid 512 level, the ratio is still on the side of more stability than instability. It's probably still by quite a bit. But when you've climbed through the upper 12s and have done a handful of 13As and you're trying to break into 8A or 13B, it's not uncommon for that ratio to have shifted so that it seems there are more unstable positions than stable ones, requiring more continuous movement with fewer chances to shake or chalk, or at the very least, fewer chances to shake and chalk efficiently. And further, at this grade, at around the 13B level, if you get more opportunities for stable positions, it's likely that you're going to find either a long stretch of instability or just more difficult unstable moves. That's literally how these climbs get their grade. Sure, it might be that the holds are worse, or the feet are smaller, or the moves bigger or more strenuous, but ultimately, all of that means that there's more instability. That's what it all comes down to. And while it's tempting to think that getting stronger is always the answer, in reality, it's only part of the equation. And to be honest, if you've bumped up against a grade that you're having a hard time breaking into, it's a pretty sure bet that someone weaker than you has already climbed that route, and probably a lot more routes of that grade. And don't get me wrong, getting stronger can help. I'm a fan of getting stronger. But it's going to help only as much as you can efficiently apply it to the wall. And what I've noticed is that for a lot of people, translating their strength and power to the wall very often means embracing the instability required. That's where we get stuck. In fact, if we look at the science around transfer of training or practice to sport performance, it's nearly always the training activities that are representative of the performance with the right constraints in place that transfer the best. In climbing, one of those representative components that can't be stripped away when we're talking about embracing instability is the decision making. You have to make the decision that you're going to allow the instability, the seeming loss of control. Now, what this means is that if you're someone who can't release that control outside on sport climbs, then just going bouldering on the boards that already reward you for jumping isn't going to help that much. Because you rarely have to actually decide whether to jump or stay in control. Because staying in control sometimes isn't even an option. And when it is, board climbers often just default to jumping because it works. The holds and positions are usually good enough to do that. And I'm not just bagging on boards here. They can be an incredible tool if you don't have this hang up about moving that way outside. And if you can willingly release that control when it's best, boards are a great way to hone that skill, for a while at least. But they aren't the place to learn it and then hope that it transfers. And we can't just wait for the setters to set the perfect learning tool for you. But we can do it on what's already been set. What we want to do is get on relatively easy terrain that lets you put your focus on the decision-making and the reflection after a move is completed. And we want to constrain our climbing in such a way that we'll be regularly put into these situations that require us to move through a less stable space. So let's look at a few different ways that we can do this on our own, and then we'll talk a little about how to progress the methods and make sure that they transfer to climbing outside on sport climbs. Now, if we discuss the stability issue in terms of the 5 atomic elements of climbing movement, it's mainly an issue of position and commitment. Depending on the person, tension or rhythm could also play a part. So first, my favorite drill for the folks stuck at mid 5'11 or even mid 5'12 if you climb in an area that has a very stable general nature like the Red River Gorge or a lot of slabby vert areas, is the 1-foot drill. And you can see here in the drill matrix that comes in the Atomic Elements course that this drill targets our main themes, position and commitment, with a bit of rhythm thrown in as well. You're simply going to climb a boulder twice, first with the left foot only, second with the right foot only. You can use your other leg however you need, as long as you aren't smearing on the wall and using anything as a foothold. What this is going to do is, first, obviously, take away that third point of contact that's so important for stability. But it will also put you into these awkward or wrong foot positions. And this is going to challenge your commitment, and it's going to force you to try to find control in positions you aren't used to. This will result in you having to move with a little more momentum, relinquishing some of that control. You're going to constantly have to make adjustments to your position, tension, trajectory, and you're repeatedly going to have to commit to less than ideal moves. And if you're new to this, I bet you hesitate a fair amount. Now, some moves are going to work great with just the 1 foot. Others, not so much, and those will usually work great with the other foot. But by learning what's possible, if you allow for that instability, you'll eventually find that by not swapping feet constantly, you can move through these positions faster and save yourself a lot of time and energy. And as climbs get harder, you'll start choosing to do moves from the wrong foot, even when the quote-unquote right foot is an option. For instance, on the left, I'm doing this sequence using the wrong foot several times, embracing instability. On the right, I'm switching feet so that I'm using the correct foot, which is more stable. Now, it might be the case that each actual move is more efficient with the correct foot, but because of all the foot switches, using the wrong foot is nearly twice as fast. So once we take into account the time under tension, it's easy to see how embracing instability can actually be much more efficient. So practicing the 1-leg drill will, eventually, help you get better and faster at making that decision. Now, next is a drill that we talked about on this channel before, but it'll go a long way toward helping your lack of stability become efficient, something I find to be very important for the sport climber trying to move past 12A or B, not becoming wildly inefficient when you're forced to be unstable. That drill is monkey style, or momentum climbing. It's half of my absolute favorite drill, sloth monkeys, which you can see also targets your tension, position, and rhythm and gets half on commitment. That half usually all resides on this side, the monkey style. Now again, on terrain that you wouldn't normally have much trouble with, you'll simply climb with more momentum and more monkey-like, trying to create a rhythm that allows you to use that momentum to your advantage. And one of the hallmarks of this style is there's no real pause. You never get totally stable and then just sit in it. Instead, you try to keep moving continuously and try to recognize where you're fighting to control a swing or change direction, and then try to figure out how to use that swing or that momentum to your advantage instead. It'll often feel awkward at first when you do this, and that's fine. Now, there are two common mistakes made when practicing monkey style. First, loading up to do a big dyno or giant move. If it takes longer to load up and breaks the rhythm, it's missing the point entirely. Number two is trying to climb as fast as possible, like I'm doing on the left. Not only does that ramp up your arousal to a point that's harder to recover from, but it inevitably leads to mistakes and ultimately is no faster, if not slower than, climbing with a smooth, confident rhythm. Now let's take a look at how going deeper into this drill can further improve your efficiency. I'm trying to do this boulder with as much stability as possible. The first obvious issue is that it requires a lot of strength and tension to make these moves more stable. And then when I'm forced to release control, I'm hesitating, over-gripping, and making mistakes that I have to correct. And it's just dreadfully slow. Now, if this boulder is high on a hard route and I'm on my third try of the day, it's unlikely that I'm going to be able to summon the required strength and tension. Even if I desperately want the control, it's probably what's going to hold me back from sending. Now this time, I'm allowing a little more instability into the mix. I'm making the decision to use momentum in a few spots, and it's executed pretty well. It could still be refined, sped up, and get a little more efficient. Ultimately, though, it's not bad. This time, I'm going to use skills learned in the monkey style and 1-foot drills to skip all of that foot switching and tic-tacking. There's far more instability in this method, but it's much faster. And if we compare the pretty well executed sort of mid-level monkey sequence to the one that's more extreme, it's obvious which one's going to be faster. Whether that's more efficient will depend on the particular sequence and route. But practicing this in the gym, on relatively easy terrain, making these decisions to forego stability, will make you better outdoors at spotting these opportunities and pulling the trigger on unstable moves when necessary. Now the final drill is called no chalk, no shake, and is exactly what it sounds like. It can be done indoors on routes or moderately long boulder circuits or outside on sport routes. It can be done on top rope if that's easier at first, but it's almost certainly most effective when done on lead. However, once you've worked out the discomfort of doing it on lead and you can transfer those skills quickly, then it can be really efficient to do on boulders where you have more control over the difficulty or sustained nature of the climbing. Now, I've seen some low 513 climbers have a lot of trouble with this drill. You may not, but you also might. Now, I actually used to do this drill as part of my warm-up on a mid 511 and then a 12B before I sent my first 514. It got me prepared to climb in a similar way on the project. Now for this drill, you won't be stopping at rest stances and you won't be taking advantage of stable positions to chalk up. The only place you get to pause is at clips, and then you just have to get moving again. Now this doesn't need to be a race, just continuously moving slightly faster than you're comfortable with, and continuing to move when you want to stop for some sort of stable reset. If you aren't used to doing this, it's going to feel really uncomfortable. But if you watch the top climbers on the hardest routes, they're often doing this for long sections, sometimes skipping clips entirely, and oftentimes when they do stop to clip, using this discus throw technique to get moving again, rather than grab a hold, get settled, because the position isn't going to be stable anyway. And as you increase the difficulty of this drill over time, you'll find that you'll get better at recognizing when there are small bits of stability in the midst of otherwise unstable movement, providing opportunity for mid-move microshakes or even quick chalks or clips. No chalk, no shake is really going to challenge your commitment and can help anyone transfer these new abilities in less stable movement onto actual sport climbs. Now, all three of these drills should start on terrain that you're fairly comfortable on. We want the difficulty to come in the constraint, the positional and commitment challenges of one leg or the rhythm of monkey climbing. That's where it should feel hard. The best grade for you to do this on is the one that allows you to get it done, but is challenging for you to stay in the drill. If you get to the top of the route, but you had to stop twice to chalk up or shake out, or you got to the top of the boulder, but you had to use the opposite foot for one move, that's not a success. This isn't performance. The goal is not just to get to the top. This is practice or training. So the goal is in how you do it. It's in the constraints themselves. Challenge yourself. It should feel awkward and bumbly. Keep bumping up the grade as you improve, a little at a time. That's how learning works. So if you're finding yourself plateaued at one of these common grades, give it some thought and maybe give these drills a try for a while. You can also check out the Atomic Elements of Climbing movement course and our proven plans, which are training plans built around these patterns that I've noticed at specific grade plateaus. Those are at the links in the description. Thanks for watching or listening. In the show notes, you'll find related links, videos, and episodes, as well as how you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Current, where we connect the dots to help climbers learn, grow, and excel.